Lee from Tallahassee, Florida said, "First, thank you for not being Brandon Walker." You're welcome, Lee. He continues, question, Bud Elliott has hinted at and maybe even argued for a college draft and elimination of eligibility restrictions. Do you see either of these awful options as legitimate possibilities? Now, I will admit to you, I haven't heard Bud say that. And I drove all the way back from Harris County to Nashville last night. So I listened to the most recent episode of Cover 3, and I did not hear anything like that. That doesn't mean he hasn't said it. That just means I haven't particularly heard it. But let's just pretend like he did. And let's have some fun at Bud's expense here. I actually presented this idea once upon a time, but as many frequent listeners and viewers of the show know, sometimes I do the whole alternate universe thing, which is where in a consequence-free environment and a responsibility-free environment, I can just make things up. Famously, I have an opinion that I think is so radical in this alternate universe that I haven't even presented it on this network, this platform, this show before. And I still am not going to do it. It has to do with scheduling, but I'm not going to do it yet. But I did, once upon a time, just kind of wonder aloud. Colin happened to have the mic on and the camera rolling. I just wondered aloud, what would college football be like if players got drafted instead of recruited? Well, like, what would it look like? Forget about how crazy the idea is or how unfunctional it would be. Just what if it happened? Like, what would it look like? Now, the first thing I thought was what it would do to the recruiting industry. So the recruiting industry would, it would still exist, but I almost wonder how much different it would look like. Would it look like the mock draft community? Would we have, I think the 7-on-7 circuit, I think the camp circuit would become much more combine-esque. And I think that instead of having individual camps on home campuses, or campi, plural of campus, you would have regional camps, which kind of already exist, but there would be mega camps, like the Atlanta Combine, the Cleveland Combine. And I think that all the teams would go there. I think that would happen. I also think that you would have to shave it down considerably from 134 teams. Because we're going to have a snake draft. What are we going to do? It's like a fantasy football team or league. So I think what you would do is you would probably, shave it down to the power 4, the power 2 even. And then is everyone just getting equal numbers of draft picks? Can you imagine knocking on the door at Georgia and saying, Kirby, not recruiting anymore. You can get rid of all these guys now. We are going to draft. We're going to draft. So you're going to have the same opportunity to select players as South Carolina does and as Kentucky does. And how do you feel about that, Bud? Huh? You've heard some of his locker room speeches. You'd get that. On camera, you'd probably get it. So again, for 1,000,001 reasons, I don't think it would happen. But in some alternate universe, it's interesting to think about how it would happen. Now, the elimination of eligibility, that's actually something at the personnel symposium we have here in Nashville every year. A lot of people in the industry were here last year, and that came up. I remember that came up. And people were it was an open forum, throw out some ideas, and let's talk about them. And someone said, hey, what if we just didn't have eligibility? I mean, we're in an environment right now where guys are playing their 7th and 8th years. What if we just didn't have eligibility? What if the true market forces of need were all that dictated whether you were on a team or not? I don't think I'd be a fan of that either, because one of the things I love about college football is things keep moving. Like, guys keep coming in, guys keep leaving. Every roster is refreshed. It's like completely turned over every 2 or 3 years. I actually like that. I also think it's a way to inject hope into into fan bases that have been long suffering, because you've always got that freshman class coming in. You always you don't want to be getting beaten over the head by a team and then look and say, Lab McConkey can play another 5 years at Georgia if he wants to? What? What? No. So I wouldn't want that either. But I had one other thing. Okay, so since Bud allegedly said this, I want to throw a third thing in there. Now, this won't be popular in these hallways, but everyone's gone home for the night already. I'm not advocating for this. I'm just asking, what would this be like? Imagine if I snapped my fingers and recruiting rankings just didn't exist. On three's not there. 24/7's not there. Rivals not there. None of these things ever existed. Like it was never born as an idea. You can go back even before the website era. Imagine if there was just college football teams recruiting guys they've scouted, but the public has no metric that's placed on the players. Imagine how many more schools would have more hope going into a year. See, that's crazy. Like a lot of people say expanding the playoff is going to give more teams more hope. Buddy, if you did away with recruiting rankings, you wouldn't know that you've been on average recruiting the 45th best class in the country. You just think, hey, we got a linebacker that apparently is pretty good, and he had an offer from Ole Miss, and he came here, so that's great because we're Middle Tennessee, so that's great, right? And, then what's going to happen is going to happen to you on the field, but you wouldn't know what to expect. What are you going to do, go scout all of them yourself? Of course you're not. That kind of footage is on the recruiting websites, and they wouldn't exist in this hypothetical scenario. Now, it should be noted I would not have a job in this scenario either because I was hired by 24/7 Sports 4 years ago. So the more I thought it through, the more I realized this probably is not well thought out for me, but in a fun, hypothetical, alternate universe, it's at least interesting. You know what? Here's a little call to action in the comment section down there. You don't have to put your name to this. You don't have to advocate it for it actually happening. But if you could just have fun over in like Fantasyland, what is one switch you wish you could flip in the sport just to see what would happen? Have a draft, have no eligibility, have no recruiting rankings. Those were the ones we talked about. What would you have happen? Would you do away with pass interference just to see what would happen? Why not play a game without helmets? Again, there's no consequence. There's no risk. We just get to do it. It's not real. It's a simulation. Relegation? Anyone? Promotion and relegation system? It's all fair game in Fantasyland.